United States Department of Agriculture.
Have a question, go ahead and type it into the Q&A. We are going to have a question session later where if you want to say your question, we'll promote you to speakers. But for now, just type it into the Q&A. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a little icon that says Q&A, and you can type it into there. So I see a few people with your hands up. Go ahead and type your questions in and we'll get to them. All right, so we can go ahead and get started. Pamela, thanks for all your organization on this. If you want to hit start recording, we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone for joining us for the second webinar in our Transdisciplinary Approaches webinar series. My name is Jessica Shade. I'm a national program leader at USDA NIFA, and I'm one of the organizers of this series. What the series sets out to do is highlight the opportunities and challenges of transdisciplinary approaches within agriculture. This series is a response to existing and emerging challenges in the food and agricultural sciences that we've heard from researchers and industry members alike. People have flagged that there are a lot of problems facing agriculture that are multifaceted, and traditional disciplinary boundaries can limit our ability to address them. So using transdisciplinary approaches can be an important tool for tackling agronomic issues because they can address complex challenges that single disciplinary approaches aren't able to solve. They can increase the likelihood of new practice adoption, and they can help reduce the potential for unintended consequences of more narrow research. But using transdisciplinary approaches is different than just throwing a few names from different disciplines in as co-PIs onto your grant application. It involves intentionally integrating knowledge from different disciplines with relevant stakeholders and community members to address societal challenges. And the development of transdisciplinary approaches engages these diverse teams from the onset of project conceptualization. For those of you who aren't familiar with transdisciplinary approaches, or if you just want to learn a little more about the what and why of using transdisciplinary approaches, check out the recording of our last webinar, which you can view on this website here. And there's also a QR code you could follow. We have another webinar in the series planned for March, focused on case studies of successful transdisciplinary approaches, looking at teams that have been using these methods and what they've found helpful and pitfalls that they've encountered. So you can register for the webinar using the link on this slide. And please stick around after the presentation, after the Q&A session, because we're going to have an evaluation poll where you can help us improve our webinars for the future and identify topic areas that you'd be interested in seeing us cover. So that's really helpful for us, and it'll only take 1 minute tops. Today, we're going to be focusing on the science of team science, and I am thrilled to hear from our speakers. Dr. Jenny Cross is a professor of sociology and director of the Institute for Research in the Social Sciences at Colorado State University. She's also the director of the Team Science Core for the Colorado Clinical and Translational Sciences Institute. She has developed a series of team science competency workshops that focus on building individual and team collaboration competencies for translational and transdisciplinary teams. Dr. Ann Mook is a senior team scientist at the Institute for Research in the Social Sciences, and she specializes in evaluations and ecosystem needs assessment. She works with and in interdisciplinary teams, and in addition to team science, and has worked on numerous interdisciplinary environment-related research projects. So thank you both so much for being here. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, Jessica. While Anne is loading our slides, I just have to say, I personally have not developed everything. Everything I do with a team. So anything I've developed has always been with a team of folks. We are really delighted to be with you here today to talk about the science of team science. Next slide. And what I'm seeing is your presentation view, not the actual PowerPoint.
Oh, really?
View. Yeah, I'm seeing the black presenter view, not the presentation actual view. You probably need to change the.
What about now?
Yeah, better.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. I want to start today's conversation by talking to you about the reality that right now we are in a period of change for science. Next slide. The era that we're in right now is an era where we recognize that the field of science is changing. And our funders from NSF to NIH to even foundations are really recognizing that the grand challenges that we are facing today cannot be solved by one discipline. They require convergence, the merging of ideas, approaches, technology, and application, and translation from different fields. So as we think about the challenges facing agriculture, Jessica already said, we know in this space that individual fields can't solve the big challenges that we're facing. And so this team science approach has been emerging really over the last 2 decades, where science has been saying, we need to be moving towards problem solving science. And that means we need to build new skills in teams. Next slide. The people who study the science of science, which is not the same thing as the science of team science. So people are looking at how has science been growing, emerging, changing, shifting. Published a recent article about the shift in science, that it is an ever-evolving network of ideas and researchers. And we've gone from kind of trying to understand the nature of the earth and earth systems and people to really starting to think about how does all of what we know from those various fields help us to solve problems, so that scientists are now working in more networked ways than they ever have been before. Next slide. Some of those changes that we're seeing are really specifically about how complexity is shifting science. We now have access to data and analytic power that we didn't have even when I was getting my PhD. Some of the complex data analysis we might like to do for network science wasn't really possible. So now we have open science and access to data from around the world that allow us to answer bigger questions and to really work in more applied ways than we have been before. But it still means that all of us need to deal with complexity and transdisciplinarity in ways that we probably weren't trained in our fields. We were trained in our field to know the knowledge, the theory, the methods, and to demonstrate our competency in that. But those competencies didn't always include how do we work across fields. Next slide. As we look at the patterns of science, what has really been changing? We can see that over the last century in science and engineering, the average number of scientists publishing articles was a little over 1. And the social sciences took a little bit longer to move towards publishing in larger teams. But now the average in science is 5 or 6 authors. And so our old standards for tenure and promotion, and even how we think about what science is and how it gets done, are changing everywhere, from basic science to the social sciences, and even in the arts and humanities, that science is now a collective enterprise. Next slide. One of the things that we think about when we think about collaboration and transdisciplinarity is what's really happening, not just in our own fields, but also how wide is the geographic scope of the collaborations that we are engaged in. And so this figure just shows what international collaboration looks like. So we're not just adding more authors. We're not just adding authors across fields. We're also collaborating with people across cultures and across different institutions and really across the world. So the United States is actually the leader in international collaboration, followed closely by China and the UK. So as we think about solving complex problems in the agricultural field and really any scientific field, the opportunities for us to learn from other people are also expanding. Next slide. What I find really personally exciting about this new era of science, where we're focused on solving problems and bringing together the tools from different fields and having the capacity to look at data from around the world, because now we have the ability to share things digitally in open science, and we have access to big data in ways that we never did. We now can answer bigger questions. So here's a great example of the Global Lake Temperature Collaborative of scientists from around the world that said, hey, we all have data about how temperatures in lakes are changing. What if we combined all of our data from all of these separate individual studies and looked at what are the global patterns of shifts and change? So this is a really good example of how open science and data sharing have made possible new publications and international collaborations that weren't possible maybe even a decade ago. Next slide. It also really means that we're able to do new types of science. We are able to study complexity and systems and integration in systems in new ways. We are able to study topics across space, across scales, and across time in ways that were not really possible. And this allows us to push forward each of our own individual fields. And it allows us to think about solutions in new ways. When we're able to think about what's happening across space and scale, it actually allows us to think about what and simulate possible solution sets in the future. And so this is part of the excitement of transdisciplinary science and this new era of big science and large collaborations. Next slide. Anne and I both have a little history of studying networks, and network science is something that is used in many, many fields. We, of course, are interested in the study of social networks, of how human society is organized into different levels, from individuals and small groups to larger organizations to nation states, and understanding that some of the things that we're interested in studying are happening across different levels of social scale and also in different places. And we know that social context and place, really matters. This is something for sure we think about in sustainable agriculture, that the patterns and solutions that work in Iowa are not necessarily the patterns and solutions that are going to work in the middle of Africa, or even in Colorado in the arid West, because just the precipitation levels might make a huge difference in terms of what conservation practices are available to us. So when we're thinking about complexity science, network analysis allows us to look at data in each of these different layers and to understand the complex relationships, the web happening in each layer, and then also to study what's happening across different levels, from what's happening on the ground and how ecological networks are connected to human social networks, and how those social networks are connected to markets and to international and national political campaigns. So this is one of the things that is made possible in this new era of complexity and data intensive and robust analytics that weren't possible when I was a student. Next slide. But one of the other things that matters when we're thinking about this new era of science is actually, what are the solutions that we're coming up with? This article published by Kimbrell et al. Looked at the deep network relationships between genes, the physiological pathways in the human body, connected those to the known risk factors that we can do an assessment of in a doctor's office, and helped us to understand why some treatments work for some people who appear to be at risk for suicide and which ones don't work. And that complex multi-level network analysis has actually pointed to the opportunities for using new drugs and new treatments based on these physiological and actually kind of genetic things that are happening. And that kind of data intensive analytics in search of a really practical solution. How do we prescribe the right drugs for the right people to help reduce suicide is what's made possible by both transdisciplinary science and really data intensive science. So we're not just asking new exciting scientific questions, we're answering real world problems. And this question about why do some treatments work to prevent suicide and why do other ones not is one of those really complicated questions that is solved by better data and analytics and by larger disciplinary teams. Next slide. So you've all heard from the NSF that they're, one of the biggest, funders of science in the country, and they've been calling this transdisciplinary space convergence research. They have a specific funding initiative called Growing Convergence Research, but we're really seeing this across the funding landscape in all types of funders that are really thinking about funding science that is driving research that is trying to solve a compelling problem and requires the deep integration across disciplines, as well as deep integration with community and industry partners that really understand the problem from the ground up. And so this is the exciting space that we're in science right now, is this opportunity to solve complicated problems. Next slide.
All right, I'll take over from here. And I am excited to share a couple of strategies for effective collaboration. So first, maybe not the first thing that we think about when doing good science, but we don't just want to do good science, we also want to get to know each other. So one of the things that you should have on your agenda, if you're working in a team, is to schedule time for social interactions. And the reason why you want to do this is that you may know a bunch of things about your teammates that you can see from the surface, right? But that's about 10%. 90% of all these other things like emotions, values, beliefs, systems are really the things that you start to learn from other people once you interact with people, when you ask them questions, when you start to learn more about them. And one of the things that you really want to do is getting to know your teammates better, because that is a big predictor of working well together. So, as you may know, if you have different feelings, beliefs, and systems of thinking, that may lead to some dispositional differences. We may also have different ways of how we express these dispositional differences. And in order to best navigate and negotiate those differences that we have to really understand what the differences are, how they're come to be about, and how we can reconciliate those. So as you may know, Jenny and I work with numerous teams as team scientists, and we try to help them to work the best in teams as they can. So here is one example of a team in one field where there is like a very successful PI in the middle, and we asked them a lot of questions. Some of the things that we asked them is like, who do you publish with? Who do you write grants with? Who do you see at work? And that's great, but the more connections and the more interconnected they are, the better they're able to understand each other. So it's not just that we ask these questions, how do you know each other professionally? But we also ask them questions about, who do you interact with socially? Who do you seek advice from? Who's your friend? And once we see that there's more of these ties and there's more opportunities to interact, and there is deeper knowledge of one another and deeper caring and understanding of one another, we see that teams start to do better. So here's a team where on the one hand, we see a social network analysis of people who indicated to be friends with each other. And we see a very active, successful PI, but maybe not as deeply integrated within her team as she could be perhaps in the future. And then we also ask our teams questions about team readiness. And this is a great way to assess like how the team is doing, if there are opportunities to improve, and what kind of interventions we may do. So in this particular team, what we see some of the things that are really important in predicting whether a team is going to work well together are things like, do you have fun together? As you can see here, people don't think that their meetings are particularly fun. That means that they're probably not going to prioritize working with this team and really bringing that commitment. Also, if you look at some other things like, do people have clear rules? Do they know that how they can contribute, how their expertise is important? Do they trust each other? These are all very important predictors of how well people are going to do and how well people know and trust each other. Here I have another team where they had just started with some seed funding. And here you can see in this social network analysis of people who indicate that they're friends with each other is many people on the team indicate that they're friends with each other, also seek advice from each other, they work with each other, and that's all really great. Then when we look at the team effectiveness of this team, it's like they think their meetings are fun, they like being part of their team, they feel like they have clear roles and responsibilities, and also the outcomes of these teams. Whereas the first team that I showed, highly productive PI, but as a team doesn't work as well. This other team, on the other hand, are very effective. They're ahead of deadlines, and they really like working with each other and have already new plans in place for their upcoming future projects. So in sum, if you really have these connections with each other where you understand your belief system, your values, what you want to achieve, you are able as a team to really build trust. You dare to encounter some conflicts and negotiate what is necessary for you to participate in the team. You feel more committed to the team. You're able to take accountability, and you can focus on results. So overall, building these strong social connections with each other is going to be super important. A second recommendation is that you want to have your entire team to set goals, agendas, and facilitate. So I know we are all in many meetings together where sometimes we feel like, oh, what am I doing here? What is the purpose? And maybe you come out of a meeting and you don't really feel like anything has been achieved. And, this is important to really maintain momentum. So when you have a meeting, what you really want to think about is having a purpose. Like, why do we have this meeting? What are the objectives and the key results? How may we run this meeting, and who needs to be involved? So these are the questions that you really need to ask. And if you want to think a little bit deeper about who do we need to have on this meeting and on what aspects of this team and this meeting, one really helpful way of thinking about that is the RACI model, which stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So for some team meetings, maybe there are some people that need to be just consulted and informed, which means like they may not need to be at the meeting. We can just give them an email update about what has been discussed and decided during the meeting so that they can continue with what they're doing. So another way how we can really think about how we can make our use of meetings most effective is like, what is the purpose of the meetings and who needs to be there so that we can achieve best team functioning, deep integration, and also foster community. So on the one hand, you may be on some of these really big teams. We work on some teams with more than 100 people. It's not useful for each of these meetings to be with 100 people. You're not going to achieve that much. But for some of these meetings, that can be really helpful for team functioning, right? For example, to have an all hands meeting or cross-project research meetings, maybe some ideation of where we want the team to go. But for a lot of other things, we may have smaller paper groups. We may have one-on-one discussions in office hours where we mentor students or mentor junior or senior faculty, maybe something specifically for leadership. And some of these things should be really to build this interpersonal trust within science. And that can be things such as journal clubs, conservation cafes, or student chapters, etc. So there are a lot of opportunities for different meetings where we want different people to participate in different ways. So how can we best work in these meetings? Well, one of the things that we really want to make sure is that we're not over controlling and not under controlling. So how can we be most inclusive? So ideally, we want to send out an agenda well ahead of the meeting and give everyone an opportunity to contribute and set things on the agenda. The other thing that we want to do is we don't want to overburden one particular team member with everything that needs to be happening in the team. So, for example, who is facilitating, who is timekeeping, who is note-taking, those can be tasks that we can rotate. We can also really think about how we can best use our time. For example, using chat rooms, using virtual collaboration tools, using liberating structure so that everyone has an opportunity to share their ideas. We also really want to make sure that we use most of the time for teaming so that when we are together, we can really focus on this integration. So we really want to think about who needs to be there, what do we want to accomplish so that we can really stay focused. And then at the end, we also want to make some time to make sure that we are not just all business, but also really build these relationships with each other. And sometimes that can be like a check-in at in the beginning of a meeting. How is everyone doing? How was everyone's weekend? Maybe play some games together. Or maybe you want to create some happy hours, or we did a scavenger hunt yesterday with our team. Things like that can be really fun. So the third recommendation is using team charters. So we all do our best to get to know each other, be good teammates to each other. But we usually start to understand each other a lot better when we explicitly write down what we want to achieve and how we want to achieve it. And also over a course of time that we have a document to go back to, like, this is what we discussed. And it doesn't mean that these documents really have to be something that's written in stone, right? They're living documents that we want to adjust. But having these documents really gives us a lot of structure, clear expectations, and prevents a lot of conflicts in the future. So some of these documents that I think almost every team should have is maybe having a vision, having clear roles and responsibilities. If you're writing an article, maybe authorship agreement. And this may vary a little bit too. You may be in a team with just a couple of people on a short-term project. You may not have to need to have like a deep feedback and evaluation plan or a conflict management plan. But we also work with a lot of these teams that have 50 or 100 people. Well, then you really want to make sure that you pay a lot of attention to writing these documents, having clear documents, and revisit them regularly. Tip number 4, engage in reflective discussions. So often we just want to go and make sure that we achieve our goals. But we actually can work a lot better together if we really take the time to have these reflective discussions with each other. We know that reflective discussions are highly associated with better team performance and also better team processes. So how can we really engage in these reflective discussions? Well, one thing that you really want to do is to be searching and sharing, because we often have these expectations, perhaps, that we know a lot about each other that actually we don't. Maybe one of our teammates has like this amazing skill that I never knew about. Or maybe we all knew that certain people in our team were using certain processes, but actually some people didn't know. So really searching and sharing about what the processes are of the team, what hidden knowledge we have, what hidden connections we have can be super helpful. Then sometimes we share little things, but we don't really elaborate on it. And without really having that depth and that analytical insight, we may miss out on some things as well. And then finally, when we learn from searching and elaborating, we may also really want to think about how we are going to adapt our team processes based on that. So perhaps we want to think with that information, changing some of our routines, some of our ways how we interact with each other, maybe getting beyond some of the confirmation biases that we have. So what are some of the ways how we can achieve this reflective discussion? So some of the things that we do with our teams is that we check in with them on a regular basis, maybe every 3 or every 6 months. Other teams maybe once a year. And sometimes we use idea boards to really kind of figure out what's going on with our teams. And one of the great things about using idea boards is that it's anonymous. So you can kind of put all kind of things on sticky notes, And if other people in the team actually agree with this going on, they can even write a plus 1, 2, 3, so that we see that this is a common thing. So what the questions that we usually ask on our idea boards is like, what is unclear, what is challenging, what is missing, and what is going well. This is a great way to kind of highlight celebrate some of the things that are going well, but also kind of some of the things that may need to be addressing. Because if we don't really stop and take the time to think about it and just go, we may be struggling more in the long run. Another way of doing that is maybe doing something like rosebud thorn, where we use the rose as sharing something good that happened that week, but maybe something that we're looking forward to, and a thorn maybe something that may be challenging and something that we may need some help with in our team. Tip number 5, elicit divergent views. So one of the things that we often struggle with, especially in interdisciplinary teams or people from different countries, is that there might be one charismatic person on the team and we're just all following that person's lead, and we still kind of stick in the discipline of this person that is really leading this research. But we are really together as a team because we want to be more innovative, really addressing these big problems that we have in the world that require the collaboration and knowledge and insights and skills from people from all kinds of different disciplines. So what are some ways of overcoming that and really getting all these divergent views? Well, one thing is to really have a good structure for brainstorming. One of the things that we often do with our teams is that we first want them to brainstorm ideas alone and then come up with as many ideas as they can. And that can be freewheeling, like having some funny, out of the box, crazy ideas is totally fine. And then you really want to come together and combine and improve ideas as a team. So one of the things that we often do if we have this one charismatic person that represents a particular discipline, just not overly collaborative, is that we do convergent thinking. But if we want to have innovation and really be creative of how we can overcome things, we want to have divergent thinking. We want to think across a broad spectrum of things. So what we usually do with our teams is first we do this brainstorming. We want this diversity of ideas on a new topic and get as many diverse perspectives as we want. And then eventually we want to start consolidating, refining, coming to a decision point. And that looks all really great here on this figure. But the reality is, it's not always that easy. There's often this growing zone in the middle where we start to struggle. And we really need to tell people that this will be happening in advance and that this is something to be expected, and that sometimes a little bit of constructive conflict is good to really come to a decision point where everyone's views and expertise and roles are clear to really come to this great interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary research project. 6, minimize power imbalances. So a lot of people have told me in the past, like, hey, I actually like hierarchy because then what we have is like a clear direction and a clear leader that can tell us where to go. But if we actually look at the research, we know that if we have a flatter team, that is going to give us more impact. And a recent article in PNAS showed that actually the less hierarchy, the more flat the team is, the better it's going to work. How did they do that? They had like a database of about 90,000 articles in various journals, and they looked at the role of each of the authors on these papers. So people that were like, listed as a contributor, as a leader, writer, coordinator, conceiver, interpreter, designer, supervisor, they were the leaders. And then if you were more towards the role of direct support, like collecting, analyzing, preparing, or indirect support, discussing, editing, those kind of things, then it is considered more hierarchical. So if we kind of look at these scores of a team that is very flat, so in the red, that would be a team. We see that overall, these teams tend to be much more novel than those teams that are much more hierarchical. We also see that these teams actually have more productive support authors, but less supportive lead authors, which makes a lot of sense, right? If you're leading and paying a lot of effort to participate as a lead in an article, you're probably going to produce a fewer articles. But the most important thing here that I really want people to know, so in agricultural research, if you work together and you're all participating, there's like really a flat team where everyone contributes in these leadership roles, you're going to write articles that have much more impact. 7, you want to diversify your team. And when we talk about diversity, a lot of people think about demographic diversity, which of course is super important. Things like ethnic background, religion, gender, age, life stage, all these kind of things. But I also want us to think a little bit beyond that. Sometimes things like geographic location, the type of institution you work, maybe the cultural context, the discipline, as well as maybe your psychological style, like how do you think, what kind of educational attainment do you have, what are really your strengths according to Strength Finder or Myers-Briggs or any of these other psychological assessments. So one of the things that we know if we work in teams that are more diverse is that they are going to make better decisions. You see, if there's more gender inclusive, if a team is more gender inclusive, they're going to make better decisions. If there's even more geographic decisions are going to be even better. So one of the things that we know, if we have groups that are traditionally minoritized, actually they're going to innovate at higher rates because maybe they bring ideas from angles that we haven't really considered. Here is like an article by Hofstra et al. From 2020, pretty recent, where he showed that if you have like a fewer percentage of people of the same gender, we are going to have higher novelty. Same thing if you have if you have like people from more diverse races, you're going to have higher novelty. But there is a catch to this, is that it's not necessarily always going to be more impactful if you have, because not everyone is going to always receive it in a way as if in a more less diverse, in a more homogeneous type of group. So if you think about it, what we really find in much of the research is that actually if you have recommendations in the scientific discoveries and intentions, they get higher citation rates. But at the same time, what we really see is expert evaluations give lower scores to people that have truly interdisciplinary knowledge. So if we want to be interdisciplinary and we want to be innovative, we really have to kind of think about how we're going to fund, projects that may be, tolerant for early failure, but also are more likely to have this long-term high impact. The other thing with diversity is it is great to have diversity, and we know that this can lead to so much more impactful, innovative research, but we really have to think about how we can well manage this interdisciplinary diverse research. So that kind of comes back also to getting to know each other as people and where we come from, really understanding like what is like the role of maybe a sociologist on an environmental project, or what does it mean to come from a different country into a new scientific situation. And then finally, tip number 8 is maybe think about maybe attending some team science training. We are at IRIS Institute for Research and Social Science. We lead a team science program through the Clinical and Translational Research Institute. And this is a program that consists of 1 online course and then 6 interactive workshops. And this really builds on building relationships, setting the right expectations, building a shared language and vision, creating collaborative knowledge, managing conflict, and also leadership for all team members. So in our evaluation, we had pre and post workshop assessments of a group of about 117 people initially, and at the end 46. And it is a group that is pretty diverse in terms of their level of educational attainment and their role as a participant. We did this over 3 years, and it's mostly wide group. But what we really find is that on each of the 3 concepts that we have been thinking about, like really, how do you plan a team? How do you manage a team? And how do you best think about interpersonal relations? Is that on each of these aspects, we really see a significant improvement from pre-workshop to post-workshop. We also think about that as where we want everyone to be at a level where they are confident. And here in this quadrant, what we see is that if it's in the lower left side, it might be something that needs more help, that they're not very confident at the beginning, and after the workshop, still not entirely confident. If it would be at, that something that they would be very confident in the beginning and then become less confident, we would have to think like, what went wrong? Did we not deliver our content well? Or is it perhaps that people started to really think about, things that they felt confident in, but then when they learned more, they learned that they needed to learn more? Or are there things on the right higher quadrant where people are good at it after the workshop, they're still super good? But ideally, what we really want to see is people are maybe not entirely confident about teaming in the beginning, but after the workshop, they feel confident in each of these skills. And that's really what we found in all the items related to planning a team and managing a team. What we did find in interpersonal relations is that there were big improvements, but these are also the skills that are slightly more difficult to learn. So we will have to pay a little bit more attention to that in the future. So in short, the 8 strategies that we would recommend as team scientists for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary teams is really: 1, build social connections. 2, make sure that you work with your entire team to set goals, agendas, and facilitation. Use team charters, engage in reflective discussions, elicit diverse views, minimize power, diversify team, and 8, provide team science training if possible. If you're interested in things related to team science, Jenny and I will be at the AGU conference this weekend to share some of team science and also a toolkit that we're working on that we hope to make public together with many of our collaborators for team science in biology and other disciplines in the United States and across the world. So I think that was our presentation, and maybe now we have some time for questions.
Thank you so much, Anne and Jenny, for that fantastic presentation. These are such critical tips about working in and building effective teams. And I feel like you were myth busting some of the common misconceptions. So I know I'm going to be using these myself. For those of you who haven't noticed, while Anne was talking, Jenny was answering questions in the Q&A. So you guys can kind of look at some of the questions they've already answered. We're already getting comments. This was wonderful. Thank you. So I have some questions here. So first of all, how can teams find out about the trainings that you mentioned, Anne? So are there upcoming trainings, and can you share the links in the chat?
Yeah, so if you're in Colorado, we offer trainings through the Colorado Clinical and Translational Science Institute. We also work with many groups across the country. We sometimes present some of our works at several of the conferences. We're every year at the Science of Team Science conference where we share some of our workshops. We are this weekend at the AGU workshop. I think we are in February at the AAA S workshop. And in addition to that, we work with a lot of teams on their grant where we are either hired as a consultant or we are written into their grant as a team scientist, where we get really targeted and specialized team science workshops, consultations, evaluations to help their team do well.
Thanks so much. And I would emphasize what Anne just mentioned about having someone on your team that specializes in team sciences for these complex teams that are using transdisciplinary approaches. Having someone on board who specializes in this, who really has done some deep thinking and research on this, can be transcendental for those teams. So I highly recommend it. All right, and I see that Jenny posted the website for requesting special trainings. Thank you so much. So check out the chat. How do you evaluate scientific teams? So this is another question that we get a lot, especially here at NIFA. So what's the evaluation process like? How can you tell whether teams are being successful? And I know you kind of touched on this briefly, but if you don't mind going into more detail.
Yeah, so we have different ways of evaluating teams. So with some of our teams, what we do is we do annual evaluations, for example, with social network analysis, to really see like how connections and ties are forming. And that can be really helpful, not just to see the social structure of the team and seeing if more people are collaborating and building new connections, if we become more interdisciplinary, but also gives us some sense of how the team is doing. As I shared before, there's interpersonal effectiveness measures are things that we use on a very regular basis. So definitely surveys and social network analysis is a big part of our assessment. But as we all know, like we cannot always get everything that we want just from surveys or social network analysis. So other things that we often offer is, things like check-ins on a regular basis, focus groups, maybe one-on-one interviews with people, and especially as a third party, that can be very helpful because often if you're a PI of a project or a member within a project, it may be difficult to bring up challenging situations to someone who may be your boss. So going to a third-party team scientist who is specialized in these kind of things can be very helpful. We also use these types of interviews and focus groups to kind of write reports and recommendations. Jenny, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's good. There's a question in the chat to share the last slide. So can you go back a slide? Right now you're just sharing our emails. I'm not sure what's on that slide that they wanted to see again.
Oh,
yep, there you go. Yeah, there. Perfect. So that's the AGU one. And then you also can find us at AAAS in Denver, which is our neck of the woods. So we'll be there February 15th and 16th doing another workshop that's fairly similar to this, that is really talking about the toolkit for the whole variety of things you might want and need to help manage a really large scientific team.
There's also a question asking if you have any tips for virtual teams on how to increase the social component and fun.
Yeah, the first thing I would say to everybody is, I know there were some questions earlier, about friendships and how do we measure those. And here's the reality. Like if you were to ask me as a social scientist, Jenny, reduce all of your data, all the data you've been collecting forever about teams. How do you know, what's the one indicator that predicts if a team is going to be successful or not and productive? And I'll say how much they like each other. I was on a very large, not a very large team, a team that started small and got bigger really fast. And it got bigger really fast because it just connected people. People read a newspaper article about what we were doing on our team. They said, hey, I do something related. I want to join you. We want to expand. So we went from having one program to 5 in a year. And when someone else studying team science on campus interviewed my team, people said, I love this team. It is so fun that I make sure that I'm around to go to this meeting every week. Like this team was like, let's meet every week or every other week for 75 minutes. And we crossed over the academic classroom times so that we could always find a time that everybody could be there for part of it. I never have been a part of a team where people have said, I want to meet every week. It's like, what is that? So what that is expressing genuine care for each other and really wanting to know each other on a human level, not just on a scientist level, that good teams are teams of people that want to see each other and want to be around each other. So in the virtual space, this is so much harder, but the first piece is you've got to make some time for it. I know I've heard so many academics say, all right, we have limited time together, let's get to business. And I want to tell you that coming in with that attitude is counterproductive. If the people on your team are struggling and the world is falling apart and you spend 40 minutes with people checking in about how tough life has been, and then they only have 20 minutes to do business, they did that because they need it. And that social support is what builds trust. So trust and team productivity are like a moving spiral. The more you trust someone, the more willing you are to do hard work. The more you do hard work with them, the more you're willing and able to trust them. And so it spirals up. So if you are cutting that time and saying, stop the chit chat, stop checking in, we've got to get to business, and you're actually like reducing the trust. So the first thing is make space for it. The second is then think about what are little ways that you can add fun into all of your meetings and creating opportunities for people to connect with each other outside. So if you have 100 people and they're all across the globe and you're not ever going to get people for an all hands meeting, then think about what kinds of exchanges can you support where small groups of people are going to another thing. So you want to support face-to-face connection, and then think about what things could be integrated into your existing meetings that make time for knowing each other more personally. So if you were part of good teams during the pandemic, you might have seen a couple examples, like we did little polls and quizzes around Thanksgiving. This was the biggest, most popular one that I did, which was voting on which is the most essential side dish at Thanksgiving. And that worked with an American team. It wouldn't work with an international team, but with an American team, what we saw were these really regional differences. And we had a really robust conversation about our culture and our food ways. And it's those chances to talk and have a little fun and, tease each other a little bit over mac and cheese doesn't belong on the Thanksgiving table, or, oh my gosh, mac and cheese is an American dish. Let's talk about Thomas Jefferson and the African-American tradition. Making space for that is what it does. So I just encourage you to find your creative hat and find the people on your team that have that creative desire and give them some space to add fun into meetings.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I felt like you were talking directly to me. I am 100% guilty of getting into a meeting and being like, all right, let's get to business and get out of this meeting as fast as we can.
Yeah. So especially online, people need more time. So the counter is don't get everybody on your meetings, and really kind of brush through this fairly quickly up front in that section about meetings and effective meetings and roles and responsibilities and who should be at them. So I'll just tell a quick story. One of my teams, I really wanted the other scientists to come with me to the community stakeholder meeting, and they pushed back. And I was like, I need you there. You guys are the ones making these decisions. And they said, no, you don't need us there. We're going to make the decision in a room of 3 of us, and you don't need to come. We're going to tell you what we want to do. And then you regularly meet with the community partners. You're going to run our plan by them, and you're going to get their consultation. They're going to tell you if they think our idea is good or bad. You're going to bring that back to us, a regular meeting with us. You don't need to add a meeting into anybody's agenda. You're a perfectly good communicator and carrier of knowledge. And so they're the ones that really push me to think about who actually needs to be at that meeting to make a decision or to consult or to give advice, and how can we at every meeting have the minimum number of people there for the purpose of the meeting, and making a constant practice of what is this meeting about and who has to be part of the decision, and how can we reduce the number of people there is what can help you have more time to have a little fun when you do connect with each other.
Fewer meetings, but more robust meetings where you have time to connect.
Yeah, so focused, fewer people, And that will give you some time for social connection in those meetings when you have a really focused agenda and only the right people at it.
And before we wrap up, if you guys don't mind putting the link that QR code goes to for that December 10th meeting, I think some people are having issues accessing it. And unfortunately, we are running out of time. But before we go, I want to thank our speakers so much. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Anne. I want to thank the people working behind the scenes to make this webinar happen. Pamela, Jessica, Rodney, and Scott from the National Ag Library who set up and ran this webinar. The captioner, Anna Marie, our ASL interpreter, Leah, Megan, who is my backup on tech today, and the full steering committee and extended planning committee of the Transdisciplinary Approaches webinar series. I'm sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions. I know there's a lot of interest in this. And before we leave, we're posting the poll, so you can go ahead and fill that out. And I am going to share the sign up again for the next webinar. So you can go ahead and sign up here. It's also in the chat. And we'll also be sending everyone who registered for this the link to our next webinar. So thanks everyone so much. Go ahead and spend the next, we have 1.5 minutes left on this webinar. So use that to fill out this evaluation poll. And thanks again to Jenny and Anne.
Did you find the link for the HGU one? No. Yeah, neither did I. Hey there. We're just looking for the link for the AGU webinar that people said they weren't having connection with.
USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender.